So let us look at the questions of paper 2 this year main examination, GS paper 2, polity, governance, social issues and international relations. There is need for simplification of procedure for disqualification of persons found guilty of corrupt practices under Representation of People's Act comment. This question is part of electoral reforms. Again, it is also there in our class notes also. So, normally what is the procedure and why this we have to simplify the procedure? That is what the question talks about. So, basically it is the section 8 of Representation of People's Act 1951 of RPA 1951, where you talk about this, and also section 123 they talk about disqualification of members for corruption charges. In fact, we discussed this in the morning also. Supreme Court had come out with a judgment in 2013 wherein it has amended section 8(1)(d) of RPA 1951. Why do we need? Because at this point of time more than 2,600 MLAs have criminal records against them, and according to this PRS, Parliamentary Research website, this NGO, more than 42% of our MPs in the present Lok Sabha have criminal records against them. So when you are starting your answer, you have to start with these facts. 43% of MPs and more than 60% of MLAs in all the states have criminal records against them. This criminalization of politics, as we say, started from 1967 onwards. By 1990s, we say that this criminalization of politics has been transformed into politicization of crime. And when lawbreakers become lawmakers, rule of law would be the important casualty. One of the important features of good governance, we say, is rule of law. When these lawbreakers become lawmakers, that is the reason why efforts have been made to get rid of politicization of crime. But those efforts have not been successful. But in that context, this question was asked. Similarly, Article 102 also of in our Constitution talks about the privileges, and we need to make changes to all of them to get rid of criminals in politics. Supreme Court made an attempt, like what? Supreme Court amended section 8(1)(d) of Representation of People's Act, wherein any person who is convicted for a period of 2 or more than 2 years would be automatically disqualified for contesting elections for the term of the sentence along with 6 years. Lalu Prasad Yadav was convicted for 5 years, and 5 years plus 6 years, 11 years, he was not allowed to contest elections. Now the question is that there is a need for simplification of procedure of qualification of found. So what kind of changes that we should make? As we study in our electoral reforms, what we say is that first and foremost, we must have fast track courts. There must be fast track courts. There must be special tribunals set up by the Supreme Court to deal with these criminals. And what should these fast track courts do? They must come out with the judgment within a period of 6 months to 1 year. And if anyone is found guilty, instead of that person being disqualified for a period of 6 years, that person should be disqualified for life. Country does not require criminals. There is no need for criminals in our electoral politics. in our democracy. Country can as well be very good without criminals. It is not about constructing a new parliament house. It is about ensuring quality within the parliament. Every political party is guilty of encouraging criminals. Then, what else can be done to ensure to get rid of these criminals? What else can be done? There are so many other corrupt practices. For example, this paid news is there. We talk about all these things as part of electoral reforms. Paid news. What political parties and candidates do is that they get articles printed in the newspapers, and people normally believe that the news is authentic because the news come out in the first page. They tend to believe that this is what the work done by the concerned person. This is what is called paid news. And also we must have a control over this electronic media also, because there are so many ways of members of parliament using corrupt means to get into positions of power. Similarly, unfortunately in India, as we say, the problem is that it is very difficult to prove corruption, because Indian courts are not courts of justice, they are courts of evidence. So that is where most of these MPs and MLAs also get away with those things. We need to simplify procedures. We need to accept circumstantial evidence. We need to accept the fact that there can be what is called collaborative corruption also, collusive corruption also. For all these things, we must come out with strict measures. Fast track courts, identify the scope for corruption, banning the people for life, and then as we have mentioned, not only they should be banned from contesting elections, they should be banned from participating in political activities also. Lalu Prasad Yadav, he was still controlling the party contesting elections. They should be banned from participating in political activities also. Lalu Prasad Yadav, he was still controlling the party from jail only. Recently also, he was seen talking to some of these MLAs so that they would vote against the Nitish Kumar government also. So they should be banned from political activities. This is what you have to write for this question. This question was asked because of current events, what is happening in the last few years. What is required is political commitment. Politicians simply do not have the kind of will to take on criminals, because most of them benefit out of it. So what is the ultimate solution? To implement all these reforms, we should move towards, as we study, a political culture based on cognitions, wherein ultimately it is the people who have to reject these candidates. At present, people vote in India in the name of caste, religion, region, language, so on and so forth. What is required is people voting on the basis of performance. Then we can easily get rid of them. That is what your conclusion should be. Code of ethics and these things are there, but they don't work. In India, they don't work. You need a sledgehammer approach early. We don't require criminals. Let them contest elections. Within 5 months, 6 months or 1 year, fast track courts come out with the judgments. For that, you have to implement police reforms. You have to implement judicial reforms. You have to implement electoral reforms. All of them should be implemented simultaneously. That is what you have to write. Recent amendments to the RTI will have profound impact on the autonomy and independence of the information commissions. Discuss. In fact, exactly the same question we have given in our test series also, GS test series. We have given the same question because last year Narendra Modi government has made amendments to RTI. We have given the same question, and we have made arrangements. We have made amendments to RTI. What are the amendments that were made? This RTI, when it has come into existence, when it was envisaged, this RTI would be like that of other constitutional authorities like Election Commission or CAG or Judiciary or someone else. That is the reason why it was said that these members of RTI, information commissions, Central Information Commission as well as State Information Commissions would have a complete autonomy in their functioning. They were given security of tenure. Their salaries also were fixed so that the executive would not interfere in their functioning. You please remember here, in India, constitutional bodies are the ones which are expected to ensure constitutionalism. One of the important aspects of this constitutionalism is inherent checks and balances. This information commission is expected to ensure that as we study in good governance, one of the important features of good governance is transparency. As the second ARC, Second Administrative Reforms Commission has pointed out, RTA, this transparency is the master key to open the locks of good governance. This transparency can result in participation, it can result in decentralization, it can result in accountability, it can result in empowerment of people. That is the reason why this transparency in administration is extremely important. And that is also the reason why since 2005 onwards, when the political class realized the importance of RTI, they were trying to undermine RTI from 2005 onwards. At one point of time, Sonia Gandhi had said that one of the reasons why her political party had lost elections in 2014 was because of RTI. Because RTI had ensured transparency, because of which people had come to know about the scams that had taken place in their governments. Similarly, after 2014, when BJP came to power, one of its important goals was to reduce the power of RTI. People have realized the importance of RTI. That is why some time back one question was asked in your ethics paper also. We can understand when young people are afraid of darkness, but the problem comes up when grown-up people are afraid of light. Our politicians are afraid of light, of transparency. They are so much used to work under darkness that they cannot afford this light, transparency. That is the reason why they have been making efforts. But initially, Narendra Modi government tried to make efforts to curtail RTI. It was not successful because it did not have majority in Rajya Sabha. Now, once they got majority in Rajya Sabha, what they have done? They have brought in these amendments. That is what the question talks about. So, what is the problem here? The problem here is that these amendments were hitting at the heart of the legislation, the heart and soul of the legislation. First and foremost, now the central government has the power to decide salary and other emoluments that are given to the information commissioners. Second, central government also would decide their tenure also. Third, central government has said that since these information commissions are statutory bodies, they cannot be compared to constitutional bodies like Election Commission or CAG. That is the reason why they said that this information commission being statutory bodies, they should never have more powers than other statutory bodies like regulatory authorities, SEBI, TROI. We know how they are functioning. And that is the reason why central government had brought in these amendments. By fixing their tenure, by fixing their salary under the emoluments, and central government has also got the power to appoint state information commissioners also, violating the principle of federalism. And then it also has said that once a person dies who has filed an RTA application, then that RTA application would become redundant. So if you don't want to provide information, kill that person. Pardon?
This provision that when a person has died, if you don't get them, will be cancelled.
Yeah.
There was opposition.
Yes, government backtracked. Obviously, when there was so much of opposition to this, then the government backtracked. But Modi government wanted to bring this also. So ultimately, what they have done by these amendments is that they have completely made this information commission nothing but an extension of executive, like any other regulatory authorities. And that is what the critics also have said. On the other hand, the Second Administrative Reforms Commission had spoken about giving more powers to Information Commission, saying that we must amend the sections 11 and 12 of RTI regarding the appointment of information commissioners, Central Information Commission as well as State Information Commission. Now, who are being appointed recently as these information commissioners? A foreign service officer who was very close to the government, who simply did not know anything about administration. Complete politicization of these positions. That is where the problem. After writing all these things, you have to talk about what should be done. So this is what the answer. Next, how far do you think cooperation, competition and confrontation have shaped the nature of a federation in India? Cite some recent examples to validate your answer. This is what we study as part of dynamics of federalism in India. Indian federalism, we have all these things. Cooperation between the union and states, confrontation between the center and the states, and competition between the states also. We talk about collaborative federalism, we talk about confrontational federalism, we also talk about competitive federalism. That is what the question says. Explain those things with recent examples. Competitive federalism. In the last 6 years, the government had introduced competition among the states by introducing various indices between the states. For example, between the states, we have state human development indices are there, state HDIs, to find out which state is performing. Similarly, multidimensional poverty index is there, the question that comes up later. Similarly, there is ease of doing business index. States, between the states, every state is ranked on the basis of this ease of doing business index. Similarly, these green indices are also there between the states. How the states are protecting this environmental cover. Yes, Niti Aayog in fact had introduced so many parameters to evaluate the performance of the states on various parameters. Competitive. Earlier, this competitive federalism mostly degenerated into subsidies. One state would be giving some subsidies, other state would be giving more subsidies, third state would be giving tax incentives. In the process, every state was losing out. Now, thanks to liberalization, privatization, globalization, this competition had become much more intense. But it does not mean that it had resulted in degeneration of our federalism also. Still, every state government in India, unfortunately, is indulging in unfair competition of our federalism also. Still, every state government in India, unfortunately, is indulging in unfair competition in the form of giving more subsidies to its citizens. That is where the problem is. Competitive federalism degenerating into populistic federalism. Second, cooperation. Cooperation. Best example of this cooperative federalism are two things. One is 14th Finance Commission recommendations. Second one is implementation of GST. Cooperative federalism. Yes, Niti Aayog is also the example of cooperative federalism. You can also give Niti Aayog as the example of cooperative federalism. And confrontational federalism. Again, you give lots of examples. The role of governor, imposition of Article 356, and the recent controversy related to GST compensation. Controversy related to GST compensation, and also the controversies related to disaster assistance given to the state governments, disaster relief given to the state governments. And then this confrontation related to discretionary grants provided by the central government to the states. These are all that is between the states. I am talking about confrontation between the center and the states. What are disputes between the states? We are talking about vertical, not horizontal. So these are all the examples of what we call confrontational federalism. Why only water disputes, boundary disputes also between Maharashtra and Karnataka right now. Next, judicial system in India and UK seem to be converging as well as diverging in recent times. Highlights the key points of convergence and divergence between the two nations in terms of their judicial practices. Again, we studied these things in our classes also. What are the highlights? In fact, I gave this question in our polity governance paper also, India and United Kingdom comparison. In our test series, in our GS paper 2 test series, I gave exactly the same question, comparison between India and United Kingdom. So, what are the areas of convergence between India and the United Kingdom in terms of judicial functioning? Both the countries had adopted what is called procedure established by law in the functioning of their legal systems. Then both the countries have what is called rule of law. In fact, India's judicial system is nothing but continuation of British systems. Then both the countries have integrated judiciary. Both India and United Kingdom have integrated judiciary. And in both the countries, Supreme Court is the highest court. Recently only the Supreme Court of London was declared as the highest court also. These were the similarities. What are the differences? In India, Constitution is sovereign. In India, Constitution is sovereign. Whereas in United Kingdom, it is parliamentary sovereignty, not the sovereignty of the Constitution. Because of which the powers of judiciary are limited compared to Indian judiciary. Because in United Kingdom, Parliament has the power to make any law. United Kingdom Parliament has not limited by constitutional boundaries. Functioning of United Kingdom Parliament. And United Kingdom also, judiciary, as we have discussed, look into only the procedure established by law. Whereas in India, it is constitutional sovereignty, which gives our judiciary more powers. For example, Article 13. Under Article 13 of the Constitution, Supreme Court can strike down any law made by the Parliament if it violates fundamental rights of citizens, which is not there in United Kingdom. And in India, even though we started with the procedure established by law, by 1970s, in this Menaka Gandhi judgment, as we studied in judiciary, we introduced due process of law, which is a feature of American judicial system. Due process of law, which is a feature of American judicial system. This due process of law had given extensive powers to our judiciary. This is where you can see significant difference between India and United Kingdom. This due process of law, which is a feature of American judiciary, has made our judiciary supreme as well as sovereign also. In the name of due process of law, judiciary can interfere everywhere, anywhere, and can declare any law illegal also. For example, recently Supreme Court had declared this NJAC unconstitutional because it was violating Constitution. So Supreme Court can go into any area, which resulted in judicial activism also. This due process of law was the one which gave, in Britain, judiciary was not still active. In India, judiciary can be inactive, reactive and proactive also. That due process of law had given, along with this PIL. In United Kingdom, there is nothing like this PIL. It is mostly a locus standi. In India, we have introduced PIL, public interest litigation, wherein any person can approach judiciary even though he is not directly affected by it. So these are the significant differences. And another thing is that in United Kingdom, it is a unitary state. In India, we have federalism. So our Supreme Court can declare a law null and void. It violates federal principles also. Not only fundamental rights, even if it violates federal principles also. For example, if a central government is making a law for items in the state list, then Supreme Court can declare it as null and void. What we call it as the doctrine of pith and substance. That we will be discussing later also. So this is what we say. That is the reason why judiciary in India has more powers compared to judiciary in United Kingdom. That is the reason why you can see judiciary entering routinely into the domain of legislature and executive, which we call it as judicial activism. This is what you have to write. Again, as I said, all these things are there in our notes. In fact, I said that I gave the same question in our test series also. Next. Yeah. Recent times. In recent times. That is why, when in the original constitution, there was no judicial activism. It was only procedural established by law. In recent times, because of this due process of law, we have public interest litigation, which resulted in judiciary becoming more powerful compared to British. UPSC framed the questions very, very carefully. The questions look simple, but the answer has to be clear. What is the reason why in GS papers, out of 250 marks, nobody will get 150, 160 like in optional? Because you have to write very, very specific answers. You might know the things, but writing the specific answers, similarities anyone can write, but the differences, you have to be very pinpointed in terms of the differences, especially in recent times. Thanks to this PIL, the question which we will be discussing later also, what we are witnessing is judicial legislation, which is not there in United Kingdom. Next, once a speaker, always a speaker. Do you think this practice should be adopted to impart objectivity to the office of Speaker in Lok Sabha? What could be its implications for the robust functioning of parliamentary business in India? Again, this question we have given in our test series, because these are all current affairs. We gave this question in our test series also. If you look at again our notes, this is what we say about parliamentary reforms. The first point we always say is reforming the office of the Speaker. Why? Because Speaker has so much of power in running the business of the House that he can clearly decide which way the government can be moving. If he wants, he can make the government accountable to the House for its performance. If he wants, he can always make sure that the government could always escape from all kinds of delicate situations. Unfortunately, in India, what we have witnessed is politicization of the office of the Speaker. Especially, this had become much more problematic after the passage of anti-defection law. Under anti-defection law, we have given all the powers only to the Speaker. Speaker has absolute power in deciding determining the defections and also awarding punishments. The role of judiciary is only post-mortem in nature, and judiciary normally does not interfere in the decision of the Speaker because of the separation of functions and powers. And this led to blatant functions and powers. And this led to blatant misuse and abuse of powers by the speakers. Why this question was asked? In the last few years, in most of the states, what we have witnessed is this blatant misuse and abuse of power by the speakers, whether it is Karnataka, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Goa, Rajasthan. In all these states, what is common is the blatant misuse of power by the speakers. In fact, the same question was asked in our Indian administration paper also. Day before yesterday, we have discussed the same question also. As you can see, as I keep on saying, if you are doing Indian administration paper, you are covering all the questions of Indian polity governance also. So that is the reason why, if you remember, that is what is there in our notes also. The first point we have said is that if you want to improve the functioning of your legislature and parliament, first reform the office of Speaker. That is the reason why the first Speaker of our Lok Sabha, G.V. Mavlankar, what did he do? He had resigned from the Congress party to ensure impartial functioning. On the other hand, in United Kingdom, the convention is that the moment a person is elected as the Speaker, he would automatically resign from the political party. And in the next elections, if he is elected as to the Parliament again, the lower house, he will continue to be the Speaker. In the next elections, if he again gets elected, he will continue to be the Speaker. Once a Speaker, always a Speaker. That is the tradition. That is what we say. Because at the end of the day, it is the Speaker, the personality of the Speaker, it is the ideology of the Speaker, it is the functioning of the Speaker that would determine ultimately the effective functioning of democracy. Unfortunately, in our parliamentary democracy, the problem is executive dominates legislature. The brute majority enjoyed by the government on the floor of the House helps the government to dominate legislature. In the process, parliamentary democracy is always at peril. So how to revive the credibility of our parliamentary democracy? How to make sure that legislature becomes again effective? The first reform should be starting with Speaker. The suggestion that we have in our notes also, these things are all there in our notes only. The suggestion we have given in our notes is that once a person is elected as the Speaker, he should automatically resign from the political party. For the next 5 years, he should have nothing to do with the political party. He should not participate in the political activities. He must be completely impartial. And then for the next parliament session, in India elections are held on party basis. Since for 5 years he is not able to participate in political activities, it becomes difficult for him to get himself elected again after 5 years. The solution we have given in our class is that person should be nominated to the house next time. Then if he wants, he can continue to be the speaker. If he is not, he can join the political party. After 5 years again he can contest elections. That is the solution that you have to write here also. As I said, all these things are directly from our notes only. In order to enhance the prospects of social development, sound and adequate healthcare policies are needed in the fields of geriatric and maternal healthcare discussed. So the problem here is in India, there are two sections of society who are always neglected or ignored, either deliberately or consciously, when it comes to healthcare. Who are they? Old age people. Second one is women. Patriarchal societies, so women health does not really matter. Old age people, materialistic societies. In the last few years, especially after liberalization and globalization, what happened was breakdown of joint family systems, because of which old people are forced to live all alone and nobody was really there to take care of them. Because of which, as we say, there are so many problems. There are so many problems. That is what the question talks about. Why this question was asked? Why? Because last year, 2019, was the year of old age. Every year you have to remember, the government of India always comes out with one particular section of society. It was declared as that particular year. Last year was the year of the old aged population. That is the reason why this question was asked. So that is the reason why. So now look at what are the challenges faced by old age people in India. With 1.3 billion population, it is said that 20% of our population right now are part of old age population. Huge amount of population. Then what are the other problems that they face? Second one is old age people suffer from so many mental health care problems. They suffer from so many mental health care problems. In India, mental health care is not at all given importance. Next is rehabilitation of old age people. Rehabilitation facilities are almost non-existent for old age people. Next problem that they face is depression and other problems faced by the old age population. Next problem is access to healthcare facilities, especially in rural areas for old age people. Access to healthcare facilities. Next problem is this one, living all alone in isolation. When they are living in all alone in isolation, automatically they face problems like depression and everything else. That is the reason why the government of India had last year come out with a policy for old age people. 2020 was declared as the decade of healthy aging, and the government of India has said that they are coming out with proactive programs to help the old age people, and mostly the focus was on improving what is called infrastructure for old age population, especially in rural areas. Second, the focus was on as I said, on addressing their mental health issues. Third one is access to better health care, not only infrastructure, also access to better health care. So this is what the government of India was trying to do last year. Then of course when it comes to women, as I said, another section of society which is continuously neglected is women. In terms of MMR, India has improved, but if you go by multidimensional poverty index, all these things India is doing very badly. The government of India had come out with so many programs for the welfare of women. What are the programs that we talk about? Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, then Janani Stishu Suraksha Yojana, Mahila Samruddhi Yojana. Like this, the government of India had come out with programs, especially women. The basic problem for women, especially in rural areas, is early marriages, because of which they face problems at the time of birth of their children, which result in stunting and other problems among the children also. It has impacted the health of the mother as well as the child. Even though the government of India had come out with so many programs, you can mention all these programs, but the focus should be on analysis. Why these programs have not been that much successful and what can be done? That should be the crux of your answer. So what the government should focus on is first translating outlays into outcomes. That is what the first thing you have to write. The government must focus on translating outlays into outcomes. You have, as I said, you have so many programs targeting each and every section, targeting it each and every phase also. But why they are not? Second one is, creating awareness among the beneficiaries about the programs as well as the benefits that they are supposed to receive. As I said, for old age population also, government had so many programs. But how many people know about them? Creating awareness. Third one is, the government must reduce corruption in implementation of all these schemes. Fourth one is, government must implement these programs with the help of the third sector, NGOs and civil society organizations. They have more commitment. This is what you have to write for this question. Next, in order to enhance the prospect of social development, that is over, institutional quality is a crucial driver of economic performance. In this context, suggest reforms in civil services for strengthening democracy. Again, the same question we have given in our GS test series also. What we say is that if the country has to grow rapidly at 9% per annum, what is per annum? What is required is, you need a strong, efficient, accountable civil service. That is the reason why when we discuss about the need for reforms, we say that India has implemented first generation of economic reforms. We have implemented second generation of economic reforms. It is time for us to implement third generation of economic reforms. And what are these third generation of economic reforms? We call them as governance reforms. We call them as governance reforms. And one of the important aspects of these governance reforms are civil services reforms. What really is stopping India again going to the 9% growth rates? India achieved 9% growth rate for a short period of time in the mid 2000s. But after that, growth rate had come down. Before the corona had struck, economic growth, quarterly economic growth had come down to 3.5% of our GDP from 9%. And one of the important reasons why it had come down is policy paralysis in policy implementation. Earlier we had policy paralysis in policy formulation. Now what we have is policy paralysis in policy implementation. As we say all the time, whenever our Prime Minister goes to America asking for FDI, whenever he meets foreign investors, the first response he gets from the foreign investors is, you come and you promise us red carpet welcome. But when we come to your country, what we get is only red tapeism. India is badly in need of civil services reforms. You have to give this introduction. Why is very important. Whenever you are writing answers, why aspect is very important. This is where the difference between getting a 7 out of 10 and 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10. Why aspect. Now, anyone can write what are the reforms that are need to be implemented. What are the reforms? Those who studied public administration, this is not a difficult thing. You can write all the civil services reforms right from recruitment to training, to position classification, rank classification, to domain expertise, to performance evaluation, to promotion, to lateral entry, to accountability, to removal. All these reforms you have to write. Recruitment, training, promotion, position, rank classification, domain expertise, then removal, accountability, good governance, all these reforms that should be implemented. Second, Administrative Reforms Commission report on civil services. All those reforms you have to write. As I said, those with public administration should not be difficult at all. In fact, one of our students who is not public administration, I gave this question and he asked me, sir, what are the important reforms which I should write in the examination? I said that there are only 5, 6, I told them, write all of them. Luckily the question had come. For the main examination, I always say very easy to predict the questions. Prelims, nobody can predict the questions including UPSC. And best part of prelims is that UPSC gives the questions, they don't know the answers also. So they will try to get the answers from you people only. That is why UPSC is called Unpredictable Service Commission. For mains, we can easily predict the questions because we know the syllabus, we know from where they have to ask the questions. Next, the emergence of fourth industrial revolution has initiated e-governance as an integral part of the government. So, especially from 1990s onwards, all over the world, everyone had moved towards e-governance. From 1980s onwards, what we have seen is rapid changes in the composition of GDPs around the world. From 1980s onwards. In India, this happened from 1990s onwards. That is where you have to start your answer. GDPs around the world, they have moved from primary sector to secondary sector and from secondary sector to tertiary sector. One of the important components of this tertiary sector is IT, information technology. And it is extremely productive compared to the secondary as well as primary sectors. This IT not only impacted the private sector and GDPs, it also had a huge impact on governance systems also. That should be your introduction. It had a huge amount of impact on governance systems. Then come to the next point. Bureaucracy all around the world is known for red tapeism, inefficiency, corruption, which adversely impacts GDPs of countries around the world. It is known for red tapeism, inefficiency and corruption. You have to write answers from governance perspective. Please remember, these are all part of what you call governance questions. First 5 questions are polity. Next question is social issues. Next 2 questions are governance. As you can see in the syllabus, constitution, polity, governance, social issues and international relations. So you have to answer these questions from governance point of view. Bureaucracy is known for red tapeism. It is known for inefficiency. It is known for unaccountability. It is known for corruption. So how to improve the performance of bureaucracy? That is where this fourth industrial revolution has helped us. That is what you have to write here. How this fourth industrial revolution? By introducing e-governance. What is the definition given to e-governance? There is a second Administrative Reforms Commission report on e-governance. In that report, the simple definition of e-governance is use of information and communication technologies to improve efficiency of administrative systems. That is what we call e-governance. Use of information and communication technologies. How it can be done? That is what the crux of your answer. How ICT can help you in improving your, as we have mentioned, what are the weaknesses of bureaucracy? Red tapeism, unaccountability, secrecy, inefficiency, corruption. And you have to take all of them and explain how e-governance is going to help you. And of course, there is no participation of citizens also in governance. Highly secretive nature of functioning of bureaucracy. With e-governance, all these problems could be overcome. That is what you have to write. For example, you have this what we call online interaction, which is made possible through e-governance, which allows people to participate in governance. You can give the examples of citizen charters. You can give the examples of the portals of the government, where invite the stakeholders to come with their opinion. Very recently also the Government of India had asked the people to give their opinions regarding the draft environment report also. Yes, my GVP. Even now also you must be getting mails asking you to give your opinions. Of course, that will go into the spam of government only, but at least you have the satisfaction of giving your opinion, participating in growth and development of the country. Similarly, the single window clearance, as we study in public administration, NPM has failed digital era of governance. This digital era of governance helps you to again introduce what is called single window clearance of files, re-centralization of government. Next, B2B, B2C, G2C, G2B, all these solutions. G2G means government to government. G2C means government to consumers. G2B means government to business. And G2P also, government to people also. All these solutions can help you to overcome all the weaknesses. You have to give all the examples here. My government is like that one, wherein it is expecting people to give their solutions. Yes, you can give. There are so many examples also we had given in the class also, about Uttar Pradesh, about Andhra Pradesh, about Gujarat, about Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. All these schemes you can always give the examples there. So that is what, but again you must remember that you have to answer these questions from governance perspective. More than the facts, what really matters here is analysis. How this fourth industrial revolution had helped increase the GDPs of countries around the world. How this fourth industrial revolution had helped increase the GDPs of countries around the world, but how the governance systems of the world have failed to adapt to this industrial revolution, which is limiting the GDPs of countries around the world, because of which the governance systems of the countries have been forced to adopt ICT. That is what you have to write here. Next, critically examine the role of WHO in providing global health security during the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, this question was directly given from our test series only. I gave the same question. Because as I said, it is very easy to predict questions. Even when I was discussing this question in the class also as part of test series, I told our students that if the question is not asked, please tell me. If it is asked, you don't have to worry. Because you can easily expect these kind of questions. Because the role of WHO, people are asking, who is who? That is what they are asking. Who is who? WHO. WHO was conspicuous by its absence during the global pandemic. So you have to give a little bit of history here, how this WHO had come into existence and what is the role of WHO. It was a frontal organization of United Nations. There are so many other organizations of United Nations. One of them is WHO, World Health Organization. Basically, its objective is to ensure health for all. Its objective is to help the countries to find solutions to their health problems. All the member countries of United Nations are automatically part of WHO unless the country decides to get out of WHO. And the countries, WHO, it is headed by people. Normally, since these P5 countries of United Nations Security Council, since they were controlling all these frontal organizations of United Nations also, it was decided that these WHO and other organizations would be headed by small countries. But unfortunately what happened, these small countries were also remotely controlled by these P5 countries. For a long period of time it was controlled by United States of America. Very recently, when the question had come up to regarding who would be heading the WHO, it was China who took the initiative, and China had appointed its own favorite person as the head of WHO from a small country in Africa. So when this person had become the head of WHO, this is when corona pandemic had taken place. China deliberately and consciously made sure that this, even though it knew about the spread of corona through human beings, it made sure that it would never be known to the rest of the world, because that was the time when China was celebrating its new year also. Most of the Chinese went to foreign countries also. China did not want the rest of the world to know. Italy was the country that was severely affected due to corona pandemic, because most of the Chinese, they went to their hometown in this Wuhan province, wherein this corona pandemic had occurred, and they went back to Italy. Again, China did not inform the rest of the world that corona would be transforming through humans also. Most of these viruses transmit through animals to human beings, but corona was a special one which transmits from human to human. And China, for a long period of time, kept on lying to the WTO that corona would not spread through human beings. The same words were repeated by the head of the WHO also. That is where WHO was severely criticized. And until it has become a very severe problem, the WHO was not even willing to recognize corona as a serious crisis also. By this time last year, exactly by this time last year, it was spreading very fast, but China, for its own selfish interest, made sure that this misinformation is given to the WHO. Now, under the WHO constitution, WHO has the powers to get into the countries and also conduct research on its own, and also inspect the places, and also find out the origin of the virus and everything else. But China did not allow WHO to do all those things. Please remember here is that what is the problem with these multilateral institutions? The problem with all these multilateral institutions is that these multilateral institutions can exercise their power as long as the member countries are willing to allow them to exercise the power. Here the problem, all these things you have to write here. Here the problem is that China has flatly denied permission for WHO to conduct independent investigations into the origin of the crisis. It did not allow. WHO had already its offices in Wuhan province also, but they were not very active also. That is where another problem. And after that, WHO kept on changing the words. It was literally in the hands of China. As I said, the head of the WHO, he was sponsored by China only. There was a conflict between America and China. China had played its political games and made sure that its own person becomes the head of WHO. He was acting more as a representative of China than the head of a multilateral institution. That is the reason why WHO was severely criticized. America got so angry with WHO that America had withdrawn itself from WHO. Donald Trump has said that America would be stopping the funds to WHO. And China had become the largest contributor. The problem with all these multilateral institutions is that the one who controls the purse automatically would control the institution also. After America, China had become the largest contributor to WHO, which further reduced the independence of WHO. Every country in the world was extremely critical of World Health Organization because it was not giving proper information to the countries. Similarly, in this vaccine race also, in recent times, vaccine also, if you look at most of this vaccine, 90% of the vaccines are only going to rich countries. It is the responsibility of WHO to make sure that these vaccines are evenly distributed to all the countries around the world. In fact, equity should be the basis. Poor countries should be getting the vaccines. But there is no one to monitor this distribution of vaccines also. These are all the criticisms that you have to write. Ultimately, what is the solution? The solution is that for all these multilateral institutions, for them to be functioning in an independent and impartial manner, what is required is finances. It should be made mandatory for every country to contribute a certain amount of money so that they have the financial independence. And of course, as we keep on saying, all these multilateral institutions can be as effective as the member countries permit them. That is the reason why the rest of the world had to come together and make China accountable also for the spread of coronavirus. Multilateral institutions like WHO cannot do anything. That should be your conclusion. So this is what you have to write. Indian diaspora has a decisive role to play in the politics and economy of America and European countries. Comment with examples. And even when I looked at this question, I was really surprised. In my comprehensive test, just before 10 days before the examination, I gave exactly the same question, the role of Indian diaspora. And I gave the same question regarding this one, America and European countries. I said North America. UPSC drastically changed the question by saying America. Because if you look at the questions of UPSC in the previous years, you can easily predict the questions. It has been a very long time before they have asked questions about diaspora. The only thing I said is the soft power of India, how it is influenced. Soft power means basically the power of our people of Indian origin, how it is influencing. Comment with examples. So what are the examples that we can give here? Take the case of North America, Canada, all these places, America and Canada, all these places. You look at most of these multinational companies are headed by Indians. Sachin Adela was there, and then Google, and what is his name? Sundar, and then PepsiCo is there, Citibank is there, and most of these what we call in America software multinational companies are headed by only Indians. They have huge amount of influence on policy makers in America, because as huge amount of influence on policy makers in America, because as we study in politics also, in America what they have is a group model of a public policy formulation. It is the pressure groups who can influence the policies of the government. All these multinational companies with heavy pockets, with deep pockets, can easily influence the policies. And this Indian diaspora, what they are doing is, they are using their money power, they are using their technological power to influence policy makers in America. For example, you could never imagine when an Indian Prime Minister going to America and addressing a diaspora there along with the American President Donald Trump. Hundreds of people, thousands of people attended. More number of people attended than Trump were to address a public rally of his own also. Trump was surprised by the kind of the power of Indian diaspora there. That is the reason why, whether it is a Democratic Party or Republican Party, during these elections also were aggressively wooing Indians. Trump always identified his Republican Party with the rightist political parties in India. He went on to say that he was also like the rightist political parties in India, who is there to protect and promote the interests of the people of the country. And if you look at the Joe Biden administration also, at this point of time, if you happen to see, at least 17 people of Indian origin have been appointed to key positions in Joe Biden's administration. That is the reason why we can see drastic transformation in the outlook of America towards India. 30 years back, nobody in America knew about India as such. I will give you one more example here. When George Bush 20 years back was contesting elections for the office of president, that was in 2000, George Bush Jr. He was shown the world map and he was asked to identify India and Pakistan on world map. He was asked to name Indian Prime Minister and Pakistan President. He could not. Now, can any American president afford to do things like that? No. Why? Because India's soft power, India's diaspora. They are India's ethnic Indians. They are the most richest after Chinese. They are also highly educated again after Chinese. Their per capita income is more than the per capita income of the white Americans, and they occupy topmost positions. And they are all either not only they are contributing to India in terms of sending huge amount of remittances, which they have done earlier also. Now they are also influencing the politics there by joining the politics, becoming the senators, so that they can retain their, and ultimate one is the president, the vice president of United States of America. She openly proclaimed that she had Indian origins, and she is proud of her Indian origins. So automatically these are the things that are really valued. It is not about the volume of trade. It is not about the security relations. It is not about the defense relations. It is about these aspects. Similarly, you take the case of Europe. In Europe, countries like United Kingdom, who is the finance minister of United Kingdom right now, today, what you call him as Chancellor of Exchequer? He is the son-in-law of Narayana Murthy. Son-in-law of Narayana Murthy. Whatever may be the name, yes, whatever may be the name, I remember the name of Narayana Murthy, which is very difficult for me to do. And you asked me to remember his son-in-law, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law also, very difficult for me. So, similarly, the former Home Secretary, person of Indian origin. Sometimes the Commissioner of London, Mayor of London, person of Indian origin. And not only that, of course, the businessmen there in London, they are, one of the richest businessmen in London were Indians only. That family, what is that family? Hindujas, their family. And they are the ones who have been the senators, who have been in positions of power, and they made sure that the governments would always make policies favorable to Indians. Same is the case with Germany, same is the case with France, same is the case with other Western European countries also. Because of which, there has been drastic improvement in India's relationship with the rest of the world. If France, the French president comes regularly and says that India deserves membership of Security Council permanent seat, P5 countries. UK Prime Minister says that India should deserve to be part of UK this Security Council again. What is the reason why they are talking about all these things? Because of the role played by diaspora. Take the case of Canada. Canada is an extreme case. Canada, it is mostly the Sikhs. That is the reason why Canadian Prime Minister keeps on interfering in our internal matters also, because he has to cater to his domestic constituency. That is the reason why he says that farmers are agitating, the government should take proactive measures to resolve the farmers' agitation. Why? Because why should Canadian Prime Minister, who is sitting almost 10,000 miles away from us, talk about the farmers' agitation in Delhi? Diaspora. That is what you have to write for all these questions.
Only US and Europe is one and which Canada. Because in Europe we don't count Canada, America is not Canada.
Pardon?
Canada.
Yeah, the question is that America and European countries. America's. That is what America means. Normally you talk about American continent, not America as a country. European countries, American continent. That is the thing. Either European countries and American continent, plural.
So the Canada part also.
Yes, you have to include Canada also. Next, come to the section B part. Indian Constitution exhibits a centralizing tendency to maintain unity and integrity of the nation. Elucidate in the perspective of the Epidemics Act 1897, Disaster Management Act 2005, and recently passed Farm Acts. Again, I have given the same question in our test series also. I said that Indian Constitution always exhibits centralizing tendencies. On the one hand, we call ourselves a federal country, but it is more unitary features. It has more unitary features. Exactly the same question I have given. Explain this paradox. The question which I have given. And they have asked almost the same thing that UPSC also has asked here. They have asked in specifically in terms of these things. Of course, for that question also you have to write about only these things. What we have seen is that our constitutional forefathers, when they framed the constitution, they have deliberately and consciously opted for a strong center and much weaker states. This is how you have to start your answer. Why? Because the most important concern in front of our constitutional forefathers at the time of independence was to protect the unity and integrity of the nation. That is the reason why they have opted for a strong center and much weaker states. That's why we call our federalism, what do we say? We say that we are federal in form but unitary in spirit. To add to that, political realities also make sure that the central government always retains control over the state governments. In our federal setup, central government will be ruled by one political party, states will be ruled by other political parties, which result in, as we discussed earlier, confrontational federalism. And next thing what you have to write is that whenever the country witnessed a single party rule at the center led by a charismatic leader, it inevitably resulted in centralized federalism. In the last 6 years, this is what exactly happened. And they have given 3 examples. Epidemic Diseases Act 1897. What is this, what is so good about this Epidemic Diseases Act? What is so good about it? Under this Epidemic Diseases Act, what the government has done is that government had given directions to the state governments regarding, central government had given directions to the state government regarding maintenance of health. Health is part of what is called state subject according to our constitution. But this Epidemic Diseases Act had given extensive powers to the central government to give directions to the state government regarding health services during the corona pandemic. Central government would tell what kind of medicines that should be used to cure corona. What should the state government do? What kind of preventive measures that should be corona? What should the state government do? What kind of preventive measures that should be taken? For during this whole period of this corona, the country for all practical purposes had become unitary state. On top of it, we have Disaster Management Act 2005. If you look at it, this interstate trade and intrastate trade, these are all part of again state list. All the movement of goods and services, this is all part of state list only under 7th schedule of our constitution. They are all part of a state list, commerce, trade and everything else. And what did the government do? Using the powers it has under NDMA, the government has imposed restrictions on all of them by imposing very strict lockdown. And some of the states, if you remember during the corona times, they wanted to relax some of the strict lockdown measures imposed by the central government. If you go back to the months of April and May 2020, some state governments have said that, central government has said that as part of this, these are the specific things that you have to write. Central government has said that even if there is one case of corona, the entire district should be locked down. Some of the state governments have said that if there is only one case of corona, why should the entire district be locked down? We will lock down, we will have only what is called small regional lockdown, the village or the locality will be locked down. Central government has said that nothing doing. That is where the confrontation. Central government has said that you don't have any options. Recently, very recently also, Tamil Nadu state government wanted to open the film theatres, allow 100% audience in the film theatres. Central government had said that no. All this is part of what? State list. Centralizing tendencies. Then of course the recent form laws. As we discussed, there are two reasons when the Supreme Court can declare a law null and void. First one is when it violates the fundamental rights of the people. Second, when it violates the federal spirit of our constitution. Some of the provisions of form laws openly violates the schedule 7 of our constitution for items under the state list. Agriculture is part of the state list. Central government says that contract farming, agricultural trade is part of the central list. This is where we talk about the doctrine of pith and substance, wherein the Supreme Court would oversee whether the central government deliberately made legislation for items in the state list or some of the items had become part of the legislation just like that. Then the Central Supreme Court would go, if it is making for legislation for items in the state list deliberately, Supreme Court can strike them down, saying that it was violative of the federal spirit of the constitution. In the S.R. Bommai case, Supreme Court had ruled that federalism is a part of the basic structure of our constitution. Now that is the reason why people are saying that why should Supreme Court stop the implementation of form laws for political reasons when they are violating the federal spirit of the constitution. Agriculture is part of the state list. This is doctrine of pith and substance. So,
sir, already the model AIIMS yet, model contract filing at 18, they are already made by the central government. It was for the states to adapt or not to adapt. Then there was not very much need of this law in the first place because already model act was there in place.
Yes, model APMC Act was there long time back. Contract farming also last was there. But the central government had come out with 3 laws. Those laws are not restricted only to these things. They covered so many other items also. One is regarding the MSP. The most important one is regarding MSP. They have not dismantled it, but they have not said that MSP would be made legal. That is where. And tomorrow what happens? In order to capture the market, corporates, what they can do? They can offer very high prices to the farmers. Then farmers will forget about MSP. Once they monopolize the market, they will drastically bring down the prices. And who will lose out? Farmers. That is the fear expressed by the farmers. Wherever corporation has taken place, it always led to the demise of small scale traders all over the country. That is the reason why farmers are saying, who will protect us? If you want to corporatize agriculture, do it, but create necessary infrastructure. Have proper grievance redressal mechanism. That's a different thing. That's part of agrarian laws. Here we are talking about only federal aspects. After writing all these things, what you have to conclude? You have to conclude by saying that in the true spirit of cooperative federalism, the central government must transfer as many powers to the state governments as possible, as suggested by M.M. Punchi Commission on Center-State Relations. You have to also say that a one-size-fits-all approach cannot work in a large and diverse country like India. That should be your conclusion. Next, judicial legislation is antithetical to the doctrine of separation of powers as envisaged in the Constitution. In this context, justify the filing of large number of PILs, praying for issuing guidelines to the executive authorities. Answer. Again, please see the question carefully. It is asking you to justify the filing of PILs. Is it justified or not? Again, if you go back to our notes, we have discussed these things extensively. In fact, the same question we have asked in our test series also. But I asked the same question in our Indian administration. Where it is Indian administration or polity governance, it is the same. Judicial activism, is it justified? So the problem here is that you have to start with why judiciary is forced to enter into the domain of legislature and executive. So you start your answer with the essence of rule of law. The essence of rule of law is separation of powers between legislature, executive and judiciary. In our constitution, we have separation of functions but not of powers. That is what you have to write. In our constitution, we have separation of functions but not of powers. Legislature is responsible for making laws, executive for implementation of laws, and judiciary for interpretation of those laws. But the powers of legislature, executive and judiciary are not clearly defined, for the simple reason that in a parliamentary democracy, executive is part of legislature and executive controls legislature also. Unlike in American presidential system, wherein these powers are clearly separated. For a long period of time, as we have discussed earlier, Indian judiciary functioned on the basis of what is called procedure established by law. Judiciary refrained itself from entering into the domain of legislature and executive. It was either reactive or inactive. Especially the darkest phase of judiciary was during the emergency, when it failed to perform its functions. And Indian judiciary is expected to perform two important functions. What are they? First, protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens from exploitation by other organs of the state. What we call it as constitutionalism. It must ensure limited government. It must ensure inherent checks and balances. Second, it must ensure that the other organs of the state, legislature and executive, must function strictly within the domains, within the boundaries of constitution. So, as we have said, from this Maneka Gandhi case onwards, our judiciary introduced due process of law, which has vastly expanded the boundaries, the scope of our judiciary. From 1980s onwards, PIL has started, public interest litigation. This PIL was innovation by our judiciary to overcome the weaknesses in its own functioning. The basic problem was that our judiciary functioned on the basis of what is called locus standi. That means the person who is impacted can only approach judiciary. But unfortunately, people are poor, backward, illiterate. That is the reason why this innovation had come PIL. This PIL had literally opened the floodgates as far as judicial activism is concerned. Over a period of time, judiciary has entered into the domain of the legislature and executive, resulting in what we call it as judicial activism. The question is this judicial activism justified? Is it justified? Is it justified through public interest litigations? Should the judiciary legislate? Yes.
Is PIL derived from due process of law which we have taken from?
In a due process of law is the inspiration behind PIL, motivation behind PIL. PIL is something different. It is the inspiration. So, the question that has been asked here is, can we justify this public interest litigation through which the country is witnessing judicial legislation? You have to talk about both the viewpoints. You have to give arguments in favor, you have to give arguments against it also. As I said, all these things are there in our notes only. So what are the arguments in favor? Arguments in favor is, due to coalition governments, due to India being a soft state, the governments are not willing to take tough decisions for political compulsions. Even though where it is required governance, what we are witnessing is conspicuous absence of governance by both legislature and executive. This resulted in what is called policy paralysis. Policy paralysis in both policy formulation as well as implementation. This created vacuum. This created what is called political vacuum. In physics, we say that there is no place for vacuum in nature. Those who have studied physics, they must be knowing. Why? Because once there is empty space, it will be immediately filled with something, gases, air or anything else. There is no place for vacuum. In the same manner, what we say is that in the political climate also, there is no space for vacuum. When our executive and legislature had become inactive due to compulsions of coalition government, judiciary had entered into the space vacated by legislature and executive, resulting in judicial activism. That is what we say, judicial activism. Judiciary entering into the domain of legislature and executive. Judiciary started legislating on behalf of legislature. Judiciary started executing on behalf of executive also. There were so many instances wherein judiciary has done like this. Supreme Court had cancelled all the 122 licenses of this 2G spectrum. Supreme Court has cancelled all the coal allocation that was made from 1993 till 2013 for 20 years. Supreme Court had ordered a special investigation team to be set up to look into black money. Supreme Court had removed the appointment, removed the CAG for corruption charges. Supreme Court had issued Vishaka guidelines to protect women at workplace. Supreme Court had given directions to the speakers and governors to do this and to do that because they were not willing to take decisions. Supreme Court had asked the government to explore the possibility of interlinking of river waters, the question that was asked in your paper 1 this year. Supreme Court had asked the government not to implement certain laws, and Supreme Court had struck down some certain laws. For example, Supreme Court had declared that the right to privacy is a fundamental right, and Supreme Court had struck down that part of legislation which made Aadhaar compulsory for everything. So the question that has been asked here is that can we justify this? As we have mentioned, when legislature and executive fail, people have no option but to look up to judiciary to fill in the vacuum. It is definitely justified. It is definitely justified because ultimately democracy is all about citizens. Democracy is not about legislature or executive. Our constitution starts with we the people of India. It never says that we the parliament and we the executive of India. It says we the people of India. Whether it is legislature or executive or judiciary must work for the people. When legislature and executive have failed, automatically judiciary had to become active. And what you can see that in the last few years, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, judicial activism had come down drastically because of the single party rule, because of also the fact that legislature is willing to take decisions. And the judiciary also had become extra careful in terms of accepting PILs because it had seen the misuse of PILs also. That is the reason why judiciary is refraining itself from entering into legislation. Only recently the judiciary has entered into farm laws because judiciary felt that the government is not doing enough to resolve the issue with the farmers. That is the reason why judiciary on its own in a so-motive manner had said that the implementation of farm laws would be stalled till it comes out with the judgment so that it can find some solution to the crisis. That is what you have to say. At the end of the day, you have to go beyond the question and say that it is not about whether judiciary being active or inactive. It is about having an efficient, accountable, transparent government, which is what our constitutional forefathers have envisaged. If judiciary is forced to be active, it must be welcomed with open arms. That is what you have to write. Next, the strength and sustenance of local institutions in India has shifted from the formative phase of functions, functionaries and funds to the contemporary stage of functionality. Highlight the critical challenges faced by the local institutions in terms of their functionality in recent times. For a long period of time, whenever we discussed local self-governments, we talk about only functions, functionaries and finances. 3 Fs, this is what we always said. In recent times, as the question says rightly, the debate had shifted to functionality. What do you mean by the word functionality? Whether they have the ability to perform the functions or not. These local self-governments have the ability, have the strength, have the manpower, have the institutional capacity, have the resources to perform the functions or not. How do we start our answer? We start our answer with 1992. When the country opted for globalization and liberalization, it was realized that this globalization and liberalization cannot be successful unless there is a true decentralization of power. And in the true spirit of cooperative federalism, 73rd, 74th amendments were passed, wherein the local self-governments were given certain functions to perform. For a long period of time, they suffered from these three problems. That is, the state governments, as rightly pointed out by second ERC in its report on local self-governments, have implemented these amendments only in letter but never in spirit. Second ERC has rightly pointed out that local self-governments are local only in form but in central and state in letter and spirit also. Neither central government nor state governments have transferred the powers. So for a long period of time, we spoke about devaluation index, we spoke about activity mapping, which basically talk about the ability of which basically talk about the performance of the central and state governments in transferring functions, functionaries and finances. In recent times, as I said, as the question also says, the question is about whether they have the capacity to perform the functions. You are transferring the functions, but do they have the capacity to perform the functions? We are transferring the funds, but do they have the capacity to utilize the funds? You are transferring the functionaries. Do they have the capacity to make use of those functionaries? That is what the question says now. Why? Because if you see all over the country, whether it is urban areas or rural areas, what we are witnessing is a huge amount of distress, whether it is urban areas or rural areas. In rural areas, because of the failure of agriculture, what we are witnessing is rural distress. In urban areas, all over the country, we are witnessing so many problems, especially these urban floods, the question that was asked in your paper 1 this year, infrastructure problems, so many problems. Why? Because failure of local self-governments. Why? In spite of the fact that they have money, they have resources, they have people, they are not performing. What is the reason why? That is what the question says. Functionality. See, these local self-governments are expected to perform many functions. Take the case of rural areas. In rural areas, there is local self-governments, this agriculture, then allied activities, forest, drinking water, sanitation, education, health. All these things have to be looked after by local self-governments. In urban areas also, they have to look at all the basic infrastructure. Now the problem here is that whether they are performing these functions or not, why they are not performing? Why they are not able to perform these functions? Because of the same problems. First and foremost, state governments do not conduct elections regularly to local bodies. Most of the state governments, what do? They come out with one reason or the other reason for not conducting elections. For example, recently if you happen to read the newspapers, there is a lot of conflict between Andhra Pradesh State Election Commissioner and the state government regarding conduct of local elections. No state government wants to conduct elections. The tenure of the local self-government was over in 2018. We are in 3 years. There were no elected representatives. This is the case with almost all the state governments. They always come out with different reasons for not conducting elections. Why? Because state governments always prefer bureaucratic rule than democratic governance. This is what the problem. Second, finances. When you look at finances, none of the local self-governments have enough finances. As we study, to improve urban infrastructure, we require 100 lakh crores to improve urban infrastructure. And what is the amount of money that central government is spending through two important schemes, smart cities and Amrit Combined together, in 5 years, they are spending 1 lakh crore. And what is required is 100 lakh crores. Where do you get the remaining small change? 99 lakh crores of rupees. 99 lakh crores. 1 lakh crore, 2 lakh crores, like that, 99 lakh crores. Where do you get the money? Almost every urban local body, rural local body in India suffers from finances. One is they don't have sufficient finances. Second one is delay in providing finances. State finance commissions are not set up in most of the states. Finance Commission, the Central Finance Commission talks about devolution of funds to the State Finance Commission also, but to the local bodies directly. But this is never done by the state governments. What do most of the state governments do? Divert the finances to be given to the local bodies to pay the salaries of their employees, because none of the state governments have money. Forget about to pay their own salaries. Where is the question of transferring the money to the local bodies? When they don't have money, how can they perform their functions? And another problem is that whatever the little amount of money they have got, what happened? There was no accountability mechanism regarding spending of these finances. That is the reason why what we say here is that these 73rd, 74th amendments, it had only resulted in democratization of corruption. These are the things which you have to write in your answers. Decentralization and democratization of corruption. Earlier corruption was there at the central level and at the state level, now at the local level. Decentralization, democratization of corruption and politicization of development process. That is what they have. Politicization of development process. Take the example of something like BMC, Brahi Mumbai Municipal Corporation, Bombay. One of the richest bodies in India. Its annual budget is more than the budget of most of the state governments also. Every year it spends thousands of crores of rupees. Where does that money go? Nobody knows. Systematic corruption. The municipal ward council members themselves are the contractors. In the morning they are the municipal council members, ward council members, night contractors. So, they will award the contract to themselves. In the morning they award the contract to the contractor. In the night they will become the contractor. And they will siphon off all the funds because there is no accountability mechanisms. So whatever the little amount of money they got, it only led to corruption. All over the country, it is not only, that is the reason why everyone in India wants to join politics. Even if you are a ward council member, in 5 years you can easily earn at least, if you are efficient and committed, you can at least earn minimum 50 to 60 crores very easily, 5 years time. Because being a ward council member, the local government land, lot of government land will be there. Government land means your land only. You keep on selling all the government land. And in all urban areas, what you find is that there is huge amount of demand for land due to increasing population. There is no accountability. All the contracts, if 100 rupees comes to you, you spend only 1 rupee. On others, 99 rupees for yourself. That is what. There is no accountability. That is where problem. Functionaries, there is no separate functionaries, because of which functionality has become the problem of local self-governments. All of them combined together. They simply cannot perform any of the functions also. That is the reason why we speak about reforms. We must go for what is called direct democracy. Like the kind of system that is there in America, council manager form of government. All these things are there in our notes also. We have given all these things in our notes. All the solutions you have to write here. It is all about creating capabilities within the local self-governments to perform these functions in an efficient, accountable manner. Yes.
Sir, in today's newspaper there was an article regarding Rajasthan. The state government, instead of direct transfer to panchayat, they will be transferring to development projects accounts. So will this move?
See, the problem is that if you are transferring money to some other body than panchayats, that means you are violating the principles of democracy. At the end of the day, these panchayat bodies are the ones who are elected by the people. If you are not transferring, that means your actions are anti-democratic. But the panchayat bodies themselves are very corrupt. So what you have to do? You have to make them more efficient. That is what we say functionality. Ensure transparency, accountability and efficiency. Involve the stakeholders. Take away the power from, monopolistic power from panchayat bodies. Involve the stakeholders. That is what we call new public governance also. All those things you have to write as part of the solutions here. Let the stakeholders, NGOs, civil society organizations, private sector, public-private partnerships, media, local self-governments, bureaucracy come together and decide the projects so that there is no scope for corruption. Transparency and accountability. That is what you have to write here. And provide training to the officers working there so that they can improve their capabilities. And most of the members of these panchayat bodies and other upper local bodies are illiterate, because of which it becomes difficult for them to control the bureaucracy also. Teach them some basic education so that it becomes easier for them to control bureaucracy also. All those things you have to write here. Next, Rajya Sabha has been transformed from a useless stepney tire to the most useful supportive organ in the past few decades. Highlight the factors as well as the areas in which transformation could be visible. So, initially after independence, for a few decades, Rajya Sabha was what you call it as a useless stepney tire. How this transformation had taken place, that is what, why and how and where this transformation had taken place is what the crux of your answer. And the most important part of your answer should always be why. Why this transformation had taken place. What happened in India, especially from late 1960s onwards, was fragmentation of Indian polity. From late 1960s onwards, what you call it as fragmentation of Indian polity. Till 1967, a single political party was in power, both at the center as well as in the states. So, that political party always had absolute majority in Rajya Sabha also. So, from 1947 till 1967, Rajya Sabha, as the question was clearly pointing out, was nothing but a useless seven. Rajya Sabha, as the question was clearly pointing out, was nothing but a useless stepney tire. From then onwards, suddenly from 1969 till 2019, 1969 till 2019, for 50 years, no political party which is ruling at the center had commanded majority in Rajya Sabha. That is where it had become extremely significant. Any bill that has to be passed, it must have the approval of both the Rajya Sabha as well as Lok Sabha. And in case of constitutional amendment bills, it requires special majority also. No political party had that special majority. Even Indira Gandhi also never had that kind of special majority. For a brief period of time in 1970s, for a brief period of 2-3 years, she had that kind of majority, but after that, again she had lost that majority. So, from a useless stepney tire, Rajya Sabha had become very important organ of our parliament, because any bill that is being passed in Lok Sabha has been routinely rejected by Rajya Sabha. By 1980s, this fragmentation had become much wider because of the emergence of more regional political parties. By 1980s, in North as well as the South India, we had seen emergence of more regional political parties. And that is the reason why from 1990 till 2019, Rajya Sabha had become extremely critical for any government. Routinely, most of the bills that were passed in Lok Sabha were routinely rejected by Rajya Sabha. during this period, because this period we had coalition governments only. You have small scraping through majority only in Lok Sabha, in Rajya Sabha, whichever political party. When Congress was in power, opposition parties had majority in Rajya Sabha. When opposition parties were in power, Congress had majority in Rajya Sabha. That is the reason why it has been transformed into useful supportive organ in the past few decades. That is the reason why it has made so many significant contributions. There were so many controversial bills that many central governments wanted to push them through. There were so many imposition of Article 356. Please remember, imposition of Article 356 requires majority, simple majority on the both the houses of parliament. And most of the central government could not get them passed also. Because of which they had to withdraw the bills also. And there are so many constitutional amendment bills which required the joint sitting of our parliament also. There are so many bills, not constitutional amendment. First to constitutional amendment bills, there is no scope for any joint sitting, for ordinary bills only. So that is the reason why there are so many bills which needed joint sitting of our parliament also, because of the opposition by Rajya Sabha. You give the latest examples, as I said, the government had brought in the amendments to RTI before also, but it had to withdraw them in Rajya Sabha. Either the bills were withdrawn by the government or the bills were sent to select committees of our parliament. Similarly, take the case of in recent times, what did the government do? The NDA government only. It got majority in Rajya Sabha only last year, that is in 2020 only. And before that, for 6 years, 2014 to 2020, it did not have majority in Rajya Sabha. That is the reason why this land acquisition bill, which was passed so many times by Lok Sabha, which was sent to Rajya Sabha kept on rejecting it. The government had no option but to issue ordinances. That is the reason why, if you look at it, from 1970s onwards, the country witnessed what is called Ordinance Raj, because the governments did not have majority in Rajya Sabha. And that is the reason why Rajya Sabha could act as what our constitutional forefathers wanted, to act as some kind of checks and balances over Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha is more populistic in nature, where Rajya Sabha can be more what we call analytical, can be more can have more patience, can have more long-term perspective. Whereas Lok Sabha is always guided by short-term political populism. And that is the reason why these bills like POTA, all the other controversial bills were routinely rejected by Rajya Sabha. And what did the government recently do? In order to avoid Rajya Sabha scrutiny, the government was forced to introduce most of the bills as money bills, including Aadhaar. Aadhaar was introduced as a money bill by the government because the government did not have majority in Rajya Sabha. You have to write all these examples. Many bills were forced to introduce. Either the government had to withdraw the bills, one thing, or the government had to make the changes that are demanded by the opposition parties. Second, the government was forced to refer the bills to the select committees of parliament. Third, fourth, converting the bills into money bills, so that Rajya Sabha will not have real powers. You have to give all those things. And this is very good, healthy sign for the functioning of our democracy. But from last year onwards, the government had, especially 2019 onwards, government started having majority in Rajya Sabha. That is the reason why from 2019 onwards, most of the controversial legislations were given approval. Whether it is farmers' bills very recently, you have to give all those examples. And then removal of Article 370 and 35A from the Constitution. You have to give all those examples. Next, what are the steps required for constitutionalization of a commission? Do you think importing constitutionality to the National Commission for Women would ensure greater gender justice and empowerment in India? Give reasons. So where is the question of constitutionalization of a commission comes up? When is the question of constitutionalization of a commission comes up? As we say in India, these are all the things you will be studying in administration also. We say that in India there are three different types of institutions. Those institutions which are set up by an executive resolution. Second one is the statutory bodies. Statutory bodies means which have been set up by legislature, parliament. Third one is constitutional bodies. Constitutional bodies means which have been set up by, which are as part of the constitution. They owe their origin to constitution. What is the advantage with these constitutional bodies? They have more freedom and independence in their functioning. They don't have to work under executive. These constitutional bodies are expected to ensure constitutionalism, like judiciary, like CAG, like election commission, like UPSC, like National Commission for Scheduled Castes, like National Commission for other backward castes. These are all constitutional bodies. Then statutory bodies like National Commission for Women, National Human Rights Commission, and regulatory authorities. All of them are statutory bodies. Then executive resolution, the departments, which are companies set up by the Government of India under Indian Companies Act 1956. These are all what we call them as executive bodies. Now the question when you talk about constitutionalization of a commission means you are transforming a statutory body into a constitutional body, statutory body. And this question in fact I had given in my last year's general studies paper, because before that year the Government of India had converted National Commission for Other Backward Castes from a statutory body to constitutional body. So what is the procedure here? Article 368. You have to amend Article 368 to transfer a statutory body into a constitutional body. Then after that this statutory body becomes a constitutional body and you have to abolish the previous statutory body. So this National Commission for Other Backward Castes was a statutory body. Through constitutional amendment, this is simple type 1 amendment only, it requires only simple majority, that's not a big thing. So it does not, once this constitution is amended, then once this constitution is amended, then this statutory body becomes a constitutional body and the old statutory body will be removed. That is what. Now the question here is, what is the purpose of transforming a statutory body into a constitutional body? That is what the question says here. What is the purpose here? As we have mentioned, in case of a statutory body, the functions, responsibilities, powers, privileges, duties is defined by Parliament. And Parliament from time to time keep on changing these things. They have very less autonomy. And the members of these bodies are appointed by the executive also. That is the Council of Ministers. So the government defines what are their qualifications also. As we mentioned, this right to information commissions we have discussed previously. So these statutory bodies, you can say them are nothing but an extension of the executive, not having any real powers. On the other hand, constitutional bodies, in case of constitutional bodies, the role of the government is limited to appointing members only. There also the government has to follow certain rules and regulations. For example, if you are appointing members to judiciary, this collegiate system is there. It is the collegiate collegium that recommends the names to the government. The government has to take decision on the basis of the names. Similarly, election commission and other things also. So these constitutional bodies, their expenditure is charged from Consolidated Fund of India. And Parliament can discuss and debate but cannot vote. And their functions, their powers cannot be reduced during the term of the members by the government. They have what we call constitutional guarantee. Now, the question that we are talking about here is coming back to the question. This NCW, National Commission for Women, is a statutory body. This is a statutory body. The question says is that by converting that into a constitutional body, will it be beneficial for women or not? Should it be converted? If at all we are converting that, will it be beneficial or not? So what we say is that it can have some tangible benefits. They don't have to worry about finances. First and foremost, all the statutory bodies always think about finances. The same is the problem with information commissions also. Both Central Information Commission as well as State Information Commissions suffer from finances, adequate finances, because of which it hampers their functioning also. And the government can from time to time change their functions, responsibilities, powers by amending the concerned legislations. So domiciles sword will be having over their heads all the time also. They don't have any real independence. On the other hand, if you convert this National Commission for Women into a constitutional body, they could overcome all those uncertainties and insecurities. They can function in an independent and impartial manner also. But the question here is that having a constitutional body for the sake of having it will not serve any purpose unless it performs in an efficient manner. Because this National Commission for Women, or for that matter all other commissions, have become nothing but parking lots for politicians. They don't have any credibility. Even now also, if you look at National Commission for Women, who are the members and who are the chairman of National Commission for Women? BJP party active members. Complete politicization of these commissions. The same with the constitutional bodies also. Appointment is completely political. You follow only spoils system. So they do not enjoy any kind of credibility among the stakeholders. They don't have any credibility. Whether you are converting that from a statutory body to a constitutional body, it does not change much of the credibility of the institution. So what you must do is that you must ensure transparency and merit in the appointment of the members. Those NGOs which are fighting in the field of protecting the rights of women, they must be appointed as members so that they have credibility. Second, they must be given certain powers. They don't have any powers. Can they investigate on their own? They cannot. What about the reports? The recommendations are only advisory in nature. Even CAG is a constitutional body, but is it effective? Not at all. If you happen to see the newspaper yesterday and today, the report submitted by Kerala CAG has been rejected by State Assembly. Kerala CAG has said that state government is indulging in massive financial fraud. State Assembly has said that who are you to say all those things? We are the leaders, we are the rulers, we will do whatever we want. Recommendations of CAG are only advisory in nature. How does it really matter? It is a constitutional body or statutory body. These are the things you have to write here. Analysis is more important. Why? Because unless the government gives real powers to these bodies, it does not really matter whether it is a statutory body or constitutional body. Unless the government ensures impartial functioning of these bodies, it does not really matter. Unless the government involves the stakeholders, it does not really matter. That is what you have to write here. Analysis. Because how many people in our country, especially women, know about National Commission for Women or state women commissions? These are all ornamental positions. What do? They take up only highly populistic and controversial cases which are there in the newspapers. A film actor beats his wife, then National Commission for Women sends a notice to the film actor. And so many rapes and so many atrocities are committed against women. They don't come into the picture at all. Recently in Hathras in Uttar Pradesh, this unfortunate gang rape had taken place. What is National Commission for Women doing? They don't do anything because it was a state ruled by the same political party to which they also belong to. These are the things which you have to write here. Analysis, I always say, is more important than facts. Then what is the solution? The solution is what we have just mentioned now. Incidence and intensity of poverty are the most important in determining poverty-based income based on income alone. In this context, analyze the latest United Nations multidimensional poverty index. So this MDPI, why this question was asked? Because just before the examination, MDPI has released a report regarding India also. India's ranking has further worsened in MDPI, multidimensional poverty. So normally, what is the major criteria to decide whether a country is a rich or poor country? Normally we take per capita income. After some point of time, it was felt that this per capita income was not sufficient. Then they had come out with HDI, Human Development Index, by taking some other parameters. Even Human Development Index also was not providing true picture regarding the incidence and intensity of poverty levels in a country. That means number of poor people in the country. Second one is how poor they are also. Intensity of poverty. Incidence and intensity of poverty. That is the reason why United Nations had come out with this new criteria, MDPI, Multidimensional Poverty Index. They have taken not one or two, 10 parameters to evaluate poverty. 10 parameters. 2 of them related to health. 2 of them related to education. Remaining all are related to standard of life. Remaining are related to standard of life. In terms of education, number of schooling years per child and number of days they have attended the school also. You have attended 5 years of school, it does not mean that you have attended all the 200 days in an year also. What happens is the dropout ratio is very high. Similarly, when it comes to health, you are talking about two things. Similarly, when it comes to health, you are talking about two things. In child health and health of a female. That is what maternal mortality and infant mortality. You take those three things health. Then in standard of life, you take all the things which are needed for average human being. What are the things that are needed for average human being to have a good life? What are the things that are needed for average human being? What do you need for you? Pardon? First you need a house, right? Then what else? Food. Okay, I know that is what you always think about. Next, sanitation. Okay, then house of after that water you require. You cannot live without water, right? Yes. Food and food all the time, I can understand. Then sanitation, education and health we already have mentioned earlier. Sanitation, yes. Then electricity. Okay. Then cooking, fuel. Right? Then you need some kind of assets, anything, physical or other, for your livelihood. This is what that determines standard of life. So United Nations had come out with this MDPI, Multidimensional Poverty Index. They said that per capita income and HDI, Human Development Index, are not sufficient. So they have taken these 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and education and health. 2 plus 2, 4. They have taken 10 parameters to evaluate two things. One is incidence of poverty, second one is intensity of poverty. How many people have access to all these things? How many people have, full access to all these things? Having some kind of access. You have a house, but it cannot collapse at any point of time. Having your house is different from Rashtrapati Bhavan. That is what is called intensity. Right? You are also having a house. People also have houses in this largest slum in Asia, Dharvi, in Bombay. In 1 square kilometer, there 2 lakh people stay. In Rashtrapati Bhavan, 1 lakh square kilometers, 1 person stays. Difference is there. Both of them have houses only. That is the reason why intensity is very important. What kind of house? Sanitation. Water, drinking water. How many people in our country have access to piped drinking water? In fact, I have given all these questions in our paper 1 also. Incidentally, UPSC had asked the questions also in your paper 1, this safe drinking water. And similarly, how many people have access to house? Sanitation. And of course, the sanitation has become a major boom for India now, because in India we don't have proper sanitation facilities. There is so much of pollution, all kinds of pollution in India, because of which we are able to fight corona. On the other hand, in foreign countries, they are extremely clean, high sanitation, high standards. That is the reason why they could not fight corona. Corona had no problem, had no option but to raise its hands in defeat and leave India without a vaccine. Right? In foreign countries, corona was taking all kinds of revenge on the people there. They are talking about Brazilian variety, African variety, British variety, American variety. They are saying that one is much more dangerous than the other. Why? Because the countries are so good, clean, and corona is completely polluted. So corona already polluted. How can they pollute which is already polluted? People of India. That is the reason why our deaths are very low, and so the incidence also is very low. Sometimes sanitation we can remove here. We have to ask United Nations to think about sanitation also. Our air is polluted, our water is polluted, our food is polluted, our cooking oil is polluted, our houses are polluted. You can see in the last few days, these MCD workers, what they have done, they were on strike, they were not paid salaries, wages. So they have taken all the, all this wastage and they were throwing the garbage onto the streets. You can see in our main street of Old Rayanagar also, garbage on the streets only. Why? Because every day morning MCD workers come and throw the garbage in front of our house so that we develop more resistance to corona. They are the real corona warriors. Yes, they are the real corona warriors. They should be given Bharat Ratna, making us resistant to not only corona, even corona's grandfather also comes. Nothing can be done to us. So, but otherwise, United Nations has said that under this MDPI, this is very important for us because United Nations had identified that these sub-Saharan African countries and Latin American countries, in terms of MDPI, they are the ones which are doing worst. Why this report is important for us? Why the question was asked? Because last year, what United Nations report has said is that 5 states in India, in terms of their MDPI parameters, are much worse than the sub-Saharan African countries and Latin American countries. Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bengal, Bihar. These are the states. Conditions of people are much worse. Unless we know about the incidence as well as intensity of poverty, it becomes difficult for us to take tough measures. That is what you have to write for this. Even very recently also, this nutrition report also, child nourishment, malnourishment among children has doubled under MDPA report. You have seen all those things in the newspapers. Next, microfinance as an anti-poverty vaccine. UPSC is also influenced by corona only. Anti-poverty vaccine, what nonsense is this? Okay. Microfinance as an anti-poverty vaccine is aimed at asset creation and income security of the rural poor people in India. So, evaluate the role of self-help groups in achieving the twin objectives along with empowering women in rural India. So, here are two things that we have to remember. From this question. One is MFIs, microfinance institutions. Second one is SHG, self-help groups. So basically, when we talk about women empowerment, in the last 25 years or so, self-help groups are playing a very, very significant role. Self-help groups are playing a very significant role in empowering women in rural areas. Self-help groups are nothing but a group of rural women coming together, pooling all their resources, starting a small industry which does not require a huge amount of capital formation or technology, producing goods and services and selling them in the local markets and making profits, sharing the profits among themselves. The objective is economic independence of women. So, and whatever the investment that they are getting, it is only small investments. So, if 15 of them are coming together, if all of them get around 20,000 rupees, it will be 3 lakhs either. And they were getting institutional credit from the banks also. The question that is being asked all the time is SHG bank linkage also. Apart from that, they are also getting some kind of support from MFIs, microfinancial institutions also. So what is the objective here is to empower women in rural areas, especially economic independence. It ensured more participation of women. If you look at participation of women in our labor force is 27% at this point of time. And in the organized sector, it is only 2%. Organized sector. Rest of them in the informal sector, mostly in rural areas, either in SHGs or in agriculture. And what is it doing? It is making them economically independent. Either in some of the states, as we study in self-help groups in India, in some of the states, especially southern states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Kerala, these self-help groups have turned themselves into microfinancial institutions and they started empowering the women in rural areas. It had improved their incomes. It had resulted in creation of assets in rural areas. It had also ensured better education and health for their children. It also added to their family income also. But what happened was these self-help groups were mostly consisted of rural women who were mostly illiterate, backward and poor. They needed a huge amount of financial assistance also. Because what are the amount of money that they have was only very few, 3 lakhs. With 3 lakhs rupees, it is not possible for them to start the industries also. So banks were also not willing to give them loans. That is the reason why what happened in states like Andhra Pradesh is they depended on these MFIs, microfinance institutions. So many MFIs had come up in Andhra Pradesh, and what happened? These MFIs were charging huge amount of rate of interest from these self-help groups. These self-help groups went into a debt trap. And Andhra Pradesh state government was forced to ban these MFIs also because they were ruthlessly exploiting the women. It was forced to ban these MFIs also. On the other hand, some microfinance institutions, MFIs, have done a really great job in providing financial support to the self-help groups. Some of them have done a great job because otherwise whom should they take loan from? These SHGs would be forced to take loans from money lenders in rural areas. And these money lenders would charge a very high rate of interest. They not only would charge a high rate of interest, they would also become the middlemen. These self-help groups would be forced to sell their products to the money lenders at a very cheap rate also. And they were getting into debt trap. That is when these microfinance institutions had come up and they provided the most of these are in the NGO sector only, these MFIs, non-profit organizations, most of these MFIs. They provided, but some of them had become completely ruthless. They started charging very high rate of interest, even 20% rate of interest, 30% rate of interest also, much more than the money lenders, 40% rate of interest, because of which most of these SHGs were becoming bankrupt also. It had created so much of rural distress, so many people committed suicide also. Ultimately, the state government was forced to ban these MFIs. Even RBI also had put a lot of regulations on these microfinance institutions. Now, at present, what is the status? Most of the loans to SHGs are routed through banks only. And in states like Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu or Kerala, the loans are given at subsidized rates. As we discussed in our class also, this is in Andhra Pradesh, they are called Dwakra groups and they are given loans at 0.25% rate of interest. 0.25% rate of interest. And you have to give all the facts related to it. And you have to give the solution also. NABARD, RBI, regional rural banks and cooperative credit societies, they must come together and must be proactive in providing loans to these self-help groups so that they can be transformed into microfinance institutions that can empower rural women, create rural assets and also make women independent economically in rural areas. These are all the things. As you can see here, all the questions asked by UPSC are related to analytical aspects. They would like to know, tomorrow you become a district collector, this is what you are expected to do. Unless you know the problems faced by the self-help groups from these microfinancial institutions, how can you solve their problems? They would like to test whether you have necessary in-depth knowledge about these things or not. That is the reason why I always say that practical knowledge is what is necessary for clearing this UPSC examination. You have to go through so many sources, you have to keep on reading books, newspapers. And as I said that the problem is that mostly in North Indian newspapers, they don't report about what is happening in the South. All these self-help groups are mostly concentrated only in the South. So people in North, they simply don't know how these SHGs work, what are the MFIs and how the MFIs have exploited these SHGs. They don't know. That is where the problem comes up. Next, National Education Policy 2020 is in conformity with the Sustainable Development Goals 4. It intended to restructure and reorient the education system in India. Critically examine the statement. National Education Policy, recently the Government of India had come out with NEP 2020. In fact, I have given the same question also in our test series. Critically analyze NEP 2020. That is what I have given the question. So, this National Education Policy, the Government of India had come out with announced National Education Policy with lot of pomp and glory some time back. It says that in a restructure and reorient education system. The question says that critically analyze the contents of National Education Policy, whether it is going to be a success or a failure. So how do we start with? We say that since the time of independence till now, one of the major criticisms against all the governments, whether it is in the planning period or after the liberalization also, is deliberate neglect of two important sectors, health and education. During the time of Jawaharlal Nehru, they only focused on physical infrastructure, first constructing irrigation dams, then on public sector enterprises. After liberalization, the government had completely neglected in the name of privatization, in the name of downsizing the state, what we call it as NPM state. The government has deliberately and consciously neglected both education and health. From time to time, Government of India had come out with a National Education Policy, 1968, then 1986, 1992. After 1992, the government again had come out with the education policy only last year, 2020. If you have to talk about the present education policy, we should always look at the performance of past education policies. All these education policies had lofty ideals and ambitions, but they were never implemented in reality. India had opened up its economy in 1991. From 1991 onwards, so many changes have taken place. This fourth industrial revolution had taken place. And then, there are so many changes that have taken place in technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, digital technologies. And then, so many changes that had taken place in financial sector. So many changes had taken place in the job markets. Now, what is the problem with India? India is facing two problems, unemployment and underemployment. And another problem is the complete mismatch between what the market demands and what is being supplied by academic institutions. To overcome all these things, you have to give this introduction, and then to overcome all these weaknesses, the Government of India had come out with National Education Policy. It emphasizes on two things. One is digital aspects of education. Second one is academic aspects of education also. Now the question that has been asked is whether this education policy, it is announced by the government, 2020 NEP announced by the government, whether will it be able to realize the objectives that it has set for itself. It talks about providing a universal access to education to every person from elementary school to class 12th. Under Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, free and compulsory education for children aged between 6 and 14 years. Now National Education Policy has said that it will be extended from preschool to up to 12th standard. That is what it has said. Then it spoke about so many other things. It says that quality education is the goal, not the quantity, but the quality education. It had come out with new pedagogic structure also, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. 5 years preschooling, 3 years, then preschool, then also 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. 5 years preschooling, 3 years, then preschool, then 3 years, then 4 years, like that. Then it also has said that there should not be any artificial distinction between arts, humanities and sciences, which was the core of a previous education policy in 1986. That is the reason why, as we have said, that what is the problem with our education system? If you are a science student, you don't know what is fiscal deficit. If you are a history student, you don't know who is Archimedes, who is Newton. And if you are a commerce student, you don't know what is Constitution, because our education is highly artificially compartmentalized. National Education Policy, as we say, like the water in the oceans, knowledge is also the same. National Education Policy has said that they will make this education subject oriented, in the sense that people would be taught all aspects. They would remove this artificial distinction. Next, it also has said that they would focus on voluntary education, professional education. What is it called? Vocational training, professional education, especially from 7th standard onwards, after 10th standards onwards, the students would be given freedom. India requires badly so many professionals. The focus on professional. That is, the objective is to create entrepreneurs than creating employment. That is what the objective. Next, now the students are also given option to leave this college and come back again to the education system. Leave college, go to the market, work for some time and come back and complete your college curriculum also. They are also given this opportunity. They also have said that they want to welcome foreign universities also into India for an investment in education. So these are all some of the things that the government has said as part of a national education policy. That is what they have said. Now the question here is that, will that be sufficient? What is required? Critically analyze. First and foremost, all these aims and objectives would remain on paper unless governments come out with specific financial allocations. India is one of those countries which spends least on education. Even our neighbors also spend more amount of money. First and foremost, we must spend 6% of our GDP on education. Like we said, like FRBM, the government has come out with a legislation saying that central governments as well as state governments automatically must spend 6% of its budgeted expenditure on education. Otherwise, none of these educational policies are going to be effective. The first thing that we have to say here. Second thing is, the focus should be on quality of outcomes. ASER report, All India School Education Report, has pointed out the glaring failures of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. We are focusing only on outputs but not on outcomes. The quality of education is so bad that Indian children in the primary school or even secondary school are the worst when it comes to having mathematical knowledge and other skills of computation. They are much worse than African countries, as we have discussed with MDPI. Next problem here is this education. Is it in the which list? State list or a concurrent list? So there need to be better coordination between center and the states. You can come out with national education policy, but at the most of the execution takes place at the state level only. There needs to be better coordination. Next one is problems of privatization of education. This national education policy has not addressed problems related to privatization of education. Because of the failure of government education, poor people are also forced to send their children to private schools. It has become extremely costly. The quality is very low, but the price is very high. Either way, poor people are the ones who suffer the most. Next problem is, our education system focuses more on rote learning than on developing analytical skills. Rote learning. If you look at the examinations conducted by the CBSE, ICSE or these IITs, they only focus on one thing, memory, but not on understanding and analysis. That is the reason why when they come out of the schools and colleges, they found it extremely difficult to get jobs. Some time back, Indian Express had come out with the top rankers of CBSE in the last 25 years. And what did they say? All of them have said that whatever they have studied is completely useless when they went into the job market. There is if you look at it, go back to the newspapers and read them. Every topper has said that whatever they have studied in their college schools has absolutely no relation to what they are expected to do in the job market. What is the use of having that kind of education system? So what you must do is link education to private sector, linking academic institutions to industry. Very important. This is another important, and most importantly, values. Education system, ultimate objective of education system is to produce human beings. As we say, the basic problem with our education system is that we are producing doctors, engineers, lawyers, civil servants, but not human beings. Values. These are all the things that you have to write as part of your answer. Next, quadrilateral security dialogue is transforming itself into a trade bloc from a military alliance in present times. Discuss. And funnily, I have given the same question in our test series, Quad. Again, as I said it, when you are reading newspapers, you can easily, predict the questions. This quadrilateral security dialogue, it had its origins in the tsunami of 2004. 2004 December, there was this tsunami that had struck Indian Ocean, right from Australia to, this African countries. Almost entire Indian Ocean region was affected. That is when it was decided that all these countries must come together and have some kind of relationship. Initially, it was Australia which took the initiative, but later India initially actively participated in it. Later, due to its compulsions, India had become a silent partner. And then this was the time during the mid of 2010. That was the time when China was becoming extremely powerful. China was becoming so powerful that it was creating a lot of uneasiness among all the countries in the Indian Ocean. It had come out with this policy of a string of pearls, trying to encircle all the countries there. It had also come out with this BRC, BRA, okay, Belt and Road Initiative, as well as Old Silk Route, both the sea route as well as road also. It was trying to have major influence. That is when the countries in the Asia Pacific, in those days it was called Asia Pacific, they had come together. They had said that we must stop this aggression on the part of China. Initially, as the question itself says, it was a military alliance to prevent Chinese super hegemony in Asian region. Of course, apart from China, which other country is more powerful in Asia to match China? All these Southeast Asian countries, all those countries had realized that it was only India that could match China. They wanted India to take active part. India was not willing to take active part because of the fear of antagonizing Chinese relationship. That is when America stepped into the issue. America has said that let us form a bloc to stop Chinese hegemony in the region. That is how this Quad had come into existence. Quadrilateral dialogue. It was India, America, Australia and Japan. Initially started with the Malabar exercises, defense exercises, naval exercises in the Indian Ocean. Slowly it transformed itself into a security alliance. And in recent times, this Quad into a security alliance. And in recent times, this Quad started transforming itself into what is called a trading bloc. Again, why? To stop China. In the last decade or so, China had become so powerful that it is challenging America on every front. China has complete hold over the technology nowadays, 5G technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, and the pharmaceutical sector. Everywhere Chinese hegemony is there, Chinese monopoly is there. That is when the countries around the world had become alerted to this Chinese hegemony. They believe that China can be much more dangerous than Russia because at its height, Russia was more of a military superpower than economic superpower. Now, China has a combination of both money, security and trade. China was trying to control, all the countries. China has the kind of foreign exchange reserves which is more than the foreign exchange reserves of IMF and World Bank combined together. You can imagine how powerful it is. That is when they realized that all these blocs have realized that it is not possible for them to either fight China individually. Slowly, this military alliance is transforming itself into a trading bloc. But there are so many challenges here, because in the recent past, there are so many conflicts between India and America itself, between India and Australia and India and Japan itself. Australia is a very free country, whereas in India, in recent times, what we have seen, protectionist policies on the part of India in the last few years. Not only in India, after the global recession of 2009, most of the countries around the world also opted for protectionist policies. And on top of it, Donald Trump in the last 4 years have made American foreign policy, American economic policy regressive in nature with his slogan, America First. So, and what in recent times this initiative had gained momentum was because of Corona crisis. This Corona crisis had made the countries realize the bottlenecks on the supply side, on the infrastructure side. China is the what is called the raw material capital of the world at this point of time. India has a lot of advantage in pharmaceutical industry, but the raw material always comes from China. These infrastructure bottlenecks have made the world realize that if they depend on China, it can result in monopoly. That is when this Quad in the last few months is rapidly transforming itself into a trading bloc, wherein America, India, Japan, Australia coming together to reduce customs and exchange duties among themselves, to ensure free trade among themselves, to ensure supply chains to be alive during all circumstances. The supply chains were completely broken during the Corona pandemic. It was only China that was active during this period. The countries have realized the monopolistic consequences of a Chinese hegemony. That is where this Quad had become very important. All these things you have to write. What is the significance of Indo-US deals over Indo-Russian defense deals? Discuss with reference to stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Again, incidentally, I had given this question in our test series, last test, comprehensive test. I had given about Indo-Russia defense deals, security cooperation, and how it is impacting rest of the world. That is what exactly almost UPSC has asked. So if you look at Indo-Russia and Indo-US, Indo-Russian defense deals had a long history. When India decided to go to war with Pakistan in 1971 over creation of Bangladesh, America has threatened India, saying that if you go to war with Pakistan over the creation of Bangladesh, Pakistan is our ally. Pakistan is part of NATO countries, it is our ally. So we will fight war on behalf of Pakistan. We will send our ships to Indian Ocean, and America has threatened India. What did Indira Gandhi do? Indira Gandhi has signed a security pact, Indo-Russian security agreement. That was the basis of Indo-Russia relationships. And Russia has said that India is a security partner, defense partner of Russia. If India is attacked by any other country, Russia would come and fight war on behalf of India. This was the height of Cold War. Already the Bay of Pigs invasion was there, which has created a lot of fear among the countries around the world regarding the nuclear war between Russia and America. America could not afford another world war, especially Third World War, over this creation of Bangladesh. So America did not enter into the war. India easily defeated Pakistan. From then onwards, Indo-Russian defense relationship had become much stronger. From 1970s till 1990s, Russia was a major defense partner of India. Almost 80 to 90% of our defense purchases had come from Soviet Russia. Remaining had come from other countries like France, other countries like Israel was also a major defense partner for India. And after 1991, there has been a drastic change in the situation. What happened? On the one hand, there was a disintegration of Soviet Union. Soviet Union was not the same power as it was before. And India also has started getting closer to America. For the decade of 1990s, in international relations, as we say in the global geopolitics, what we have witnessed was this unilateralism. The only superpower was America. India also had no option. In 1998, India had conducted nuclear tests, and America had banned India for conducting nuclear tests. India needed much needed uranium for its running of nuclear reactors also. That is when again Soviet Russia had come to India's rescue. Soviet Russia had taken up the responsibility of running some of our nuclear reactors also. And that is where again the relationship was further strengthened. But later, from 2000 onwards, after later, again the defense relationship had moved in the direction of Soviet Russia, United States of America. That is when Manmohan Singh, as Prime Minister, opened up a new chapter in Indo-US relations by signing a civil nuclear liability agreement, civil nuclear bill with United States of America, paving American companies, paving the way for American companies to invest in our nuclear energy also. That has really strengthened our relationship. For a long period of time, from then onwards, America started replacing Soviet Russia. Now Soviet Russia's defense contribution to India is less than 30%, from the height of 80 to 90%. America has replaced Soviet Russia. And when India started moving closer towards America, during this period, India has diversified its defense basket also. Not only America and Russia, we started purchasing weapons from UK and France and Israel and other countries also. India started using these defense purchases as an instrument to leverage its relationship with other countries around the world. From France, we were buying Rafale aircrafts. From United Kingdom, we are buying other equipment. From America, we are buying from Israel and also from Soviet Russia. So recently, India had purchased S-400 aircraft from Soviet Russia. And in between, what did America do? What did Donald Trump administration has done? They have come out with a legislation saying that any country that has defense or trade relations with the Soviet Russia would be banned by America. Recently also it has created a lot of controversy. And India has purchased S-400, but the Trump administration had given exemption to India for once, because India is a much bigger trade partner for America. And when Donald Trump came to India last year, India has signed a multi-billion-dollar deal to buy helicopters from America also to satisfy America. And on the other hand, when India was moving towards much closer to America, we are forming an axis between America, India, Israel. And what did China do? Sorry, what did Russia do? Russia had become much more closer to China. Russia, Pakistan, China axis. That is where India, America and Iran, these three countries, and Russia, China and Pakistan, to counter Indian aggression. Russia started moving much more closer to China and Pakistan also. So again India had to balance between these two, because India cannot afford to lose Russia, a long-term ally of India. That is the reason why India started balancing. That is where the question is asked. Because the question is about Indo-Pacific region. Indo-Pacific. Earlier it was called Asia-Pacific. Now it has become Indo-Pacific region. Because both Russia and America are trying to get a foothold over this Indo-Pacific region, which is dominated by India and China. This global geopolitics is what that is really now becoming very interesting. China is using its economic strength to influence Soviet Russia. China is purchasing huge amount of these arms and ammunition from Russia. And Russia is moving closer to China, India is moving closer to USA. That is where the situation right now is. India is trying to counterbalance Russia with America also. These are the things which you have to write as part of yes.
So there is an agreement for foundation agreement with USA.
Pardon?
For foundation agreement.
Yeah, that is what I am saying.
What will be the impact on India?
That is what the agreement right now. What we have said is that, America has said that, if any country has any kind of trade relations with Russia, America would ban that country. But America, looking at India's economic might, had given exemption to India. When you are strong, nobody can really afford to exclude you. That is the reason why America is a strong votary of both America and Russia. Right now are strong votaries of India getting into CTBT and NPT also. Why? Because both of them have control over India's nuclear reactors. At the end of the day, what really matters is money, self-interest. So this is what you have to write for this paper. As you can see, it is lot more analytical. They are expecting you to know the facts and, more importantly, focus on analysis. So this is it. On I think Wednesday we will be doing paper 3, economy, then internal security, disaster management. Science and technology I won't be doing because my knowledge of science and technology is as good as your knowledge. Both of us will be sailing in the same boat only. It is like a blind man showing a way to another blind person. So rest of the things we will be doing. Of course, the next day we will do ethics paper also. So on Wednesday at the same time we will be doing paper 3.